Hello, my name is Ken Kinter, and I'm an assistant professor at Rutgers University. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an introduction to something called the 3 steps to safety. As always, my contact information is on this first slide. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions about this. This presentation is actually an abbreviated version of a larger presentation done by Dr. Tom Bartholomew, one of my colleagues at Rutgers. The link to a couple of the videos about this are on the bottom of this slide. And if you look at the channel where you probably found this presentation, you'll probably find that one as well. In fact, it's probably located on the Rutgers SHPRI site, SHPRI, which stands for the State Hospital Psychiatric Rehabilitation Initiative, which is an effort by Rutgers University in conjunction with the New Jersey Department of Health to improve the conditions of care for the patients and staff at New Jersey State Psychiatric Hospital. This mission would not be possible without the support of the Department of Health, so we thank them for that. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to start out talking about inpatient violence, the different types, the different scenarios, and then we're going to go into something called the 3 steps to safety, something that has been proven very helpful in terms of maintaining the safety of people on inpatient settings, and also to help provide additional resources, places where you can go from there. So let's start off by talking about the 3 types of violence. The first type is instrumental violence. This is deliberate violence. This is violence done in a planful manner with some sort of gain in mind. For example, the facility where I work, a very common example is if someone's going out into the community on a visit, another patient might say, look, you better bring me back some cigarettes or bring me something or else it's going to go bad for you. So there's the plan. The second type of violence is psychotic violence. This is violence that comes right out of the psychotic symptoms. And the third is reactive violence. This has more to do with maybe deficient coping skills. So it's a trigger happens or a stressor happens and that person explodes right in the moment. And here's how you see these types of violence panning out. You can see this column is forensic facilities and then civilly committed hospitals over here. So the type of violence that we actually see the most is reactive. Most of it is that impulse control related violence. Psychotic is much less, presumably because there are medications specifically for that. It's much harder to medicate intent or impulse control. Although I will say you can see the difference in forensic facilities, you will see more of that instrumental or planned violence. So this part of the presentation I affectionately refer to as how not to get your butt kicked. So let's start with step 1 of how not to get your butt kicked, and that is know your clients. Your relationship with your clients is like a checking account. And every time you have a good interaction with them, you put money in that checking account. And people that know you, you've got that nice checking account going. And that gives you more credibility and more ability to work with that person going forward, as opposed to someone that you may not have any relationship with, no checking account with whatsoever. And the research shows us people are much more prone to assault people that they don't like or that they don't know. So the first thing that you do in violence prevention is establishing that relationship. The second thing is to know when you're moving into what I affectionately refer to as hot zones. And these are scenarios in which violence becomes much more possible. So here are 3 of the main scenarios right here. 1 is limit setting, when you're telling somebody to stop doing something that they're doing. Number 2 is activity demands, when you tell somebody to do something. For example, get out of bed, go take medication, go to group. And then number 3 is denial of requests, when a person makes a request, whether it's reasonable or not, and the answer is no. All 3 of these know that when you move into any of these 3 scenarios, that violence can become more likely. Something that agitates this and can make this situation worse is something called perceived procedural injustice. And that is where the rules aren't applied universally. And in every facility I've ever worked, how the rules are applied varies. It varies by person, varies by shift, varies by day. The world of evening shift is not the world of days. The world of nights is not the world of evenings. And weekends are a different ballgame than during the week. And the problem is when things get more lenient, say over a weekend, and then you come back to Monday and things get strict again, violence can be the result. And this can change from charge person to charge person, shift to shift. So now we've identified those first 2 things, relationship and know your hot zones. And now let's move into the 3 steps to safety. And that consists of validate, explain, and problem solve. If I could throw in one other tip too before you get into this, because by the time we get to the 3 steps to safety, you are now in a crisis. One of my other suggestions before intervening in that crisis is 1 breath. Take 1 breath. It buys you a little time to dial down your own body a little bit, and also hopefully makes a boundary between the scenario or whatever you were just dealing with and this, to reduce the carryover. If you just went through something very difficult or very frustrating, you don't want to bring that into this scenario, which can already be sensitive. So I'll throw that one in as well. So let's talk about validation. Validation, to my experience, is the one we do worst in the hospitals. And that is, before we relate to someone as a hospital staff and we're explaining the rules and things like that, let's just relate to that person as a human being. Let's just relate to their emotions. I'll give you an example. We had a female client who was scheduled to be discharged from the hospital on Friday. Due to a paperwork snag, she ended up having to stay the weekend. And she found this out Friday afternoon. She was very upset. She already had plans for the weekend. And the result was her getting agitated and threatening violence and threatening property destruction, this, that, and the other. Now, it's very easy to say, look, it's done. The paperwork didn't come through. So now you have to stay till Monday. But if we don't take a moment to validate that first and say, you know what, I get it. I get that you're angry that paperwork prevented you from getting out and you have to spend another weekend here. That really sucks. I do feel bad about that. I wish I could change something about that, but I can't. Just acknowledging that that person has feelings and those feelings are valid. And to be honest with you, the patient may actually be right about something. You might actually agree with the patient. It doesn't change the issue, but it humanizes this process a little bit. Next up, explain. This is where we get into, the processes and rules of the hospital. You want to reinforce, this isn't personal. This is just the rules. This is what I tell everybody. This is part education, but also part you're trying not to let this get personal. If it's you trying to assert control over them, that might go very badly. As soon as it's personal, it's much more likely to become violent. And then last, we move into problem solving. And that is, how can you, again, you're trying to avoid in the previous step, the client identifying you as part of the problem. Here's where we become part of the solution. What can you do? One is make options for people. Like, what are the different options? Obviously, this lady can go and bust up the unit now and throw chairs and hit people and all that kind of stuff. And now not only is she jeopardizing the discharge that was going to be Friday, but now she's jeopardizing the discharge on Monday. If she gets restrained, if she gets medicated, if she's in a really bad way, this can actually cause much more consequences for her. So 1, what options do we have? 2, how can you become part of the solution? Can you make a phone call? Can you reach out to somebody? Are you going to be there Monday to make sure that this paperwork goes through first thing? People are far less likely to assault someone that they see as trying to become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So a couple other pieces about this. We talked about the bank account already. Build that relationship. It's a serious thing you can do to help maintain your own safety and also help the client from setting themselves back. Another piece is the post-crisis check-in. After the emotional wave has gone out, things settle down a little bit. Check back in with it. Are you okay? I know that was a really rough deal. I wish it had gone differently. And now you start to build the plan for next time. Is there something that we could have done differently? Is there something I could have done to help? How can we, if this situation were ever to come around again in the future, how could we handle it better than we did? So just in summary, not all inpatient violence comes from the same source. The different types of violence call for different interventions. You don't respond to psychotic violence the same way as instrumental, same way as reactive. There are hot zones, these scenarios that result in violence. Know when you're going into them that the risk has just gone up. The 3 steps to safety: validate, explain, problem solve. Don't forget the bank account. Don't forget to check in afterwards. And also that key aspect of the relationship, build the relationship. It's kind of an insurance policy. Anyway, here's where we got all this information from. Check the channel where you found this video. We have a lot of other videos that are very similar to this. So I thank you for your time and hope to catch up with you again soon. Take care.